Malaysia, New Zealand, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, and the United States. In May of 2022, we came together in Tokyo to launch negotiations on this so-called framework. We still have more work to do, but we've made substantial progress. In record time,
typically, when you have debt discharge, the IRS treats it as taxable income. With student loan forgiveness, taxes work differently. In March, President Biden signed the American Rescue Plan, which included a clause regarding student loan forgiveness, saying that any federal student loans that were discharged between 2021 and 2025 would not be considered taxable income in terms of federal taxes. Now, lawmakers are back in Washington for the predetermined midterm election sprint. Preventing a government shutdown will be the top legislative item for all lawmakers. The political environment has shifted over the past few weeks. This is impacted by a batch of legislative wins for Democrats earlier in the summer and signs the inflation-laden economy is improving. Democrats are now more confident than ever that they can stem expected losses in President Biden's first midterm elections. They are hopeful they can retain a majority in the Senate, while preventing Republicans from gaining a broad majority in the House. Passing a short-term spending bill before a deadline of September 30th at midnight, when the government funding is set to expire, is a top concern for everybody in Congress. The bill will need the support of Republicans in the Senate, and the 60 votes need to pass. Democrats want to demonstrate to voters they can govern responsibly and not allow a damaging shutdown. In the Senate, Democrats will also keep confirming federal judges nominated by Biden, with government funding set to expire at the end of the month. Both chambers are expected to pass some kind of stopgap funding extension in the upcoming weeks to avert the shutdown, and stopgap funding bills are known as Capitol Hill as a continuing resolution. The Senate Appropriations Chair, Patrick Leahy, a Vermont Democrat, is also aiming for a continuing resolution to run until mid-December to allow lawmakers time just to finish the regular appropriation bills. Now, Hawaii Democratic Senator Brian Schatz summed up the to-do list for Senate Democrats when asked recently by CNN when the September work period will look like. He said continuing resolution and judges. Amid concerns that the higher prices will hurt consumer wallets, some state and federal lawmakers are looking at ways to ease that pain at the pump. Mike Thompson uses various public databases to calculate the cost of healthcare, housing, food, and transportation, and miscellaneous expenses for seniors. It represents a bare-bones budget, adjusted for whether adults live alone or as part of a couple, and whether they rent or own homes or without a mortgage. Now, there are billions of dollars left over in stimulus funds. More and more governors have agreed to allocate this money towards the people that need the most, and that means stimulus checks. Beginning in October, California residents will receive one-time inflation relief checks of as much as $1,000. Whether you qualify for the middle-class tax refund and how much you could get depends on your income, filing status, and household size. The refund is expected to total around $9.5 billion as part of a larger $12 billion relief plan approved by lawmakers. In a statement, Newsom said California's budget passing Biden's American Jobs Plan and American Families Plan together, using budget reconciliation. There are considerable differences across party lines, with 86% of Democrats supporting the use of the reconciliation process, 59% of independents supporting it, and only 36% of Republicans supporting it. What are your thoughts on this, everybody? Should Democrats use the budget reconciliation process again? Or should they try to negotiate with Republicans? Tell me your thoughts on this in the comments below. Now, folks, we do know this. 68% of those surveyed said they would be somewhat or much more likely to support a lawmaker who votes to spend $400 billion on long-term care for seniors and people with disabilities, even if it's passed on a partisan basis. The White House is trying to jump support for the $1.2 trillion bipartisan deal, focusing on physical infrastructure like roads and bridges that President Biden and a group of bipartisan senators agreed to last week.
I will note that while the president ran on and won the most votes of any candidate in history in a platform of boosting funding for law enforcement, after Republicans spent decades trying to cut the COPS program, which again is public record, we don't need to undervalue the intelligence of the American people. The president ran on increasing that funding. It's in his budget. It was in President Trump's budget. He significantly cut that, so that's a change. And the American Rescue Plan had a great deal of funding for local and state authorities, something that can support funding for local police in communities across the country.
However, progressives have been very wary of the infrastructure deal because it leaves out key priorities. And Democratic leaders in Congress plan to move a bipartisan bill and a larger reconciliation bill together in order to try to get Joe Biden's agenda passed in full. A top Democratic lawmaker said that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is standing firm on her demand that the Senate pass the House's reconciliation bill before the lower chamber will consider the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill. Speaking to reporters after a House caucus meeting, the Budget Committee Chairman, John Yarmuth, said that Speaker Pelosi remained committed to passing the second infrastructure measure, focused on Democrats' broad policy priorities. Biden split his two-part Build Back Better for another round of checks, so a lot of good things are happening in Congress and a lot of stimulus payments can actually be sent out faster than we ever thought in the history of our lives. So, as I was saying, it's official, the governor in several states like Minnesota have actually hoped to include a tax rebate in the state's upcoming budget. It comes from the announcements of the state's budget. It's set to go for January 24. And according to the Associated Press, well, the budget will propose indexing state aid for school districts just to help combat inflation. So Waltz has told reporters that I think people are feeling inflation. Even though it might be cooling a little bit, there's a slight sense of urgency among people to get something done. And that's good here. Something should be done because the Governor Waltz's original pitch for the tax rebates has been quite generous for a lot of people. It gives single filers, for instance, a lot of breathing room, a lot of time to just think about what they can do, and now the government has already signed them into a second term. So, though not all of these fellow lawmakers share the priorities, though, because the House Speaker and Majority Leader claimed they wanted to prioritize tax credits for families, giving the families $3,000 for every child 5 or younger, with a cap of $7,500. Even the Massachusetts governor and top lawmakers signaled that a clear picture of potential tax relief may not even emerge until at least the end of January, when a key final metric is actually heard of. So one governor, for instance, said their teams are working closely through numbers and evaluating what's possible. They said that we told reporters how important it is to make sure that we're doing everything we can for the residents of the state. And Healy on the campaign trail had vowed to make progressive permanent tax relief her day one priority. She also had largely echoed support for the now former Governor Charlie Baker's sweeping tax cut proposal last year. And low, middle, and income residents have all received some stimulus payments just to stop the crying at least. But now the IRS said it recently finished correcting tax returns, filing that for 2020. And so the IRS said, folks, that the average tax refund is around $1,200, with the tax agency sending a total of $15 billion back to the taxpayers. So while taxpayers were sent letters from the IRS just to inform them about the fixes to the 2020 tax filings, well, tax review came due to the American Rescue Plan. It was signed by Joe Biden, we all know that, and because the IRS, it reviewed returns filed by workers and even other people who have jobless aid as income. So the IRS told CNBC that some taxpayers received refunds, while others received overpayment applied due to taxes or other debts. In some cases, the exclusion only resulted in a reduction in their adjusted gross income. But now we know that about 14 million tax returns were corrected. The IRS issued refunds for $12 million was